Okay, in this video, we're going to be covering some of the other basics of a Flutter application, a Flutter Dart application. Um, there's a lot of materials to cover in the Dart language, but what I will be doing is just primarily focusing on the kind of data types or objects that you will see most likely within a Flutter or Dart application, or what you need to be able to write and handle in a typical Flutter Dart application. So the the most I think one of the basic things that you need to know about Flutter Dart is how does a Flutter Dart handle basically a long running process, or how to sort of handle basically kind of like multi-threading within a Dart function or within a Dart program. As we want to be able to understand how would we write a function that would be that might take a long time to process, and then let the program sort of gracefully wait and for that long running process to finish without locking up the entire application. So the way that we do that, there is a concept within Flutter Dart called asynchronous programming. And if you were to take a very simple function like this one called simple plus, where we're just adding two numbers, and if you were to um, want to actually test that function here of adding two functions, Um, here is how we would set it up. And then um, here we can actually exercise it. So here is actually executing this very simple function called plus simple, taking two numbers, adding it together, and then printing out the results. Well, let's say that you're doing something that takes a little bit longer. So this could be potentially writing something or reading something from the local computer, or it could be, let's say, fetching data or pushing data to a server. So it could take a little while, depending on the network speed and so forth. So it could, you want to be able to write a function that handles that. So if you take a look at how this function is set up and this function is set up, it's pretty similar, except it's got this keyword of async in there. And I put a artificial delay just so that makes something take a little bit longer. So we are, this function here takes a little bit longer time because I added a little bit of an artificial delay by putting a little delay here. And then I want to be able to return the results. But because the results is going to happen sometime in the near future, those functions need to have a wrapper around the results with with this future keyword. So if I were to remove these and make it look just like the original program, I mean the original function, you would see that anytime that a function calls await, or yeah, whenever it calls a function that does await, so this might be calling another library function that either calls the server, or it would be calling to write data to a local database. It would, when you make that call to that external function, it will involve you calling it with something called await. But in order to call to use something with await in a function, you need this async keyword in the function so that it's telling the caller of this function that it's an asynchronous function. But once you do that, the data type needs to be wrapped in a keyword called focus, I mean, future. And so once we do this, then here above, we can invoke this plus function. There's multiple ways to call it. I'm going to show you this sort of the simple way. So the simple way is you call this function plus, and you use the await. So after we have set up this function to be asynchronous, we want to be able to test it. So we go to where we are going to call it here, and we call this function. And then you'll see that there's some kind of warning or error. It's saying the await function only can be invoked from within an async function. So that means that we've got to go up here, change this to async, and then also change this here, oops, up here to be return a future void, like that. That way, since this is a synchronous function, since this is an await call, we need to add this async. And now when we try to execute this and test this, right here. So you'll see that there's a little bit of a delay, and then it actually does call this plus 2 and 3, okay? And then there's another way to call it, and there's something kind of interesting about the other way to call it. So if we were to comment out this way, the first way that we did it, and try a different way to call it here. There we go. And let's say that we took out the async. There we go. Then you see that there's no actual syntax error here. So you got to be a little bit careful because this is still an asynchronous call that's happening. And then this is just another way of calling the async function. And then this then clause here works to handle the results from the asynchronous call. And then there's the clause body here to actually handle the values. If I run this again, you see there's an error here on the runtime. And that's because of the problem that I removed this async. So put this async back. Put this future void here. Now, if I call it again, voila, it works. So just be careful that when you do use this way of calling a async function, you may not see a problem within the editor, that there might be a compile error, but you will see the error at the time that you try to run it. There we go. So that's when you write your Flutter Dart code and build your application, you are going to see a lot of these type of future functions or have to deal with asynchronous programming. The next type of object or concept that you will see often is enum. So there is a way that you can basically have a enumerated type of values. In this case, you can set up an enum type of vehicles, and these can be all the different types of vehicles, or you can have all the different types of fuel, and then you can have a way to evaluate those enum values. And there can be also ways where you can do coding or logic based on the certain value of the enum value. So here, I set the enum value of vehicle type of a variable to an SUV, and then I pass that here into the switch statement, and then I could do custom code based on, let's say, a function within handling vehicles, and whether it's printing something or doing something other than that. So if I run this this enum type, let's see here, vehicle. then it will then print out all the different values of the enum and then do some custom logic based on the enum values. The other very common type of code that you will see in a Flutter Dart application is something called extensions. So this string type of string is a predefined in Flutter Dart. So this here is predefined inside of the Flutter Dart library. But you may want to extend an existing class. So here, I created a new function called is null or empty. And you may not need something like this, but you could basically extend this string class, created a new function, and then here below, I created a instance of a string, two different instances of string, and then here, as I execute this, here I could just execute it here. So I say a string extension, and now you could have basically invoke a function is null or empty or any other custom function you write using this extension. And so if I could tell that if I just comment this out, it's not going to be visible, but re-enable or uncomment this function, then this kind of function is now available. So in this third video, I did want to cover the other types of technology similar to Flutter that has some overlapping concepts with Flutter that lets you write applications for more than one target. So there are two that are more noteworthy than others. Others are either very much, how you say, not as active as these two. So I would consider Flutter to be a very active development community, much more than these two and far more than the others. But React Native is one of the types that are pretty noteworthy. So this one here was largely originally built by Meta or Facebook and targets these basically two different types of platforms. So writing it originally for either Android or iOS. They are trying to make it React Native work for other types of applications like a browser or a desktop. But I think so these are pretty, I think they are pretty moving along. But so you can consider React Native as another type of multi-platform technology. And there is also something called Kotlin multi-platform, which is another type of framework used for writing programs that can be that can operate on multiple platforms. But of course, in this class, we're going to concentrate mostly on Flutter, and we're going to be then spending the next other set of video lectures on just Flutter Dart.